What's going on, everyone? It's your boys back for another episode of the Club and Sub podcast, episode number 106. Just hit our 100th mark a little bit ago. So, off the top, if you guys do like the podcast, you have been listening to a while, or you are a new viewer, please do us a favor, hit that subscribe button. We'd really appreciate it. I think we're like a couple hundred subs away from 1,000. I would really like to get there before the end of the year. That would be dope. So, if you guys have not already subscribed, please do so. Hit that like button, helps the algorithm and all that fun stuff. And obviously we are back from our little break week from a crazy 12-week stretch that was absolutely insane, taxing. I don't know about you, Lags, but I needed a break week a bit on my end. But yeah, just off the top, I'm taking over the hosting duties as our resident host. Mr. Stargarian had his, I believe, appendix removed earlier today. So obviously probably not going to be an optimal scenario for him to come out and do the hosting duty. So rocking a two-man band this week. What's going on, Legs? What do you think about the card?
It's another early morning start, which I'm pumped about. It's a 12 p.m. start, so you always love that. But decent amount of fun fights, to be honest, and fun main event, obviously, in title contention for the heavyweight division. So I'm pumped about it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too that this is, I guess, the first legal like UFC card in Paris, because I think they've done, or in France, I should say. I know they've done, I think, a few Bellator ones, but I think this is the first ever official UFC card in Paris. So we are breaking a little bit of ground in that regard. I think we have like 3-4-ish Parisians on the card trying to feature some home talent. So we'll go ahead and run through it and start right at the bottom with the people's main event. Aileen Perez making her UFC debut against homegirl Stephanie Egger, getting that quick 1 month turnaround since her fight with Mayra Bueno Silva, which ended semi-controversially, I guess, depending on how you perceive it. But Legs, kick us off here, bro.
I guess real quick, we'll address the controversy. I didn't see the tap. I don't think any of us really saw the tap, and there was no verbal tap. So to me, I just think it was a bad call on the ref, but it is what it is. In terms of this fight, though, I don't really think Perez is UFC caliber. Like all of her fights are like over soccer moms, to be completely honest. The strength of schedule just isn't that good. But she's largely looking to get into the clinch as well and get body lock takedowns and whatnot. But I just don't think that's really going to work at all against Egger. I think Egger pretty much has her covered in every aspect. So I expect Egger to roll. Egger big favorite makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting spot from some perspective. Like one of the things in like my handicapping that I've like tried to address and change over the years is like if you go back and you just like watch somebody regionally and they fought like nothing but bums and cans like for years or whatever, I would say, okay, well, just based on the product of that, now that person's probably a bum or a can. Not always the case. However, I don't think, I'm kind of with you as well. I don't think the girl is very good. I mean, we still have so many questions on her, obviously, given the fact that she's fought nothing but cans. I think 5 of her technically 8 pro wins have come over girls who don't even have a pro W. So automatic red flag there from a strength of comp perspective. 2, even like I've heard some people say, okay, she's going out there and handling these girls accordingly. It's like, is she though? She only has 3 of those W's, I think, have come in the first round. And I mean, all these girls have been absolutely horrible. So, like, despite finishing a majority of them, like, she's still won a couple decisions, got some later stoppages and stuff. It's not like she's just like running through these girls in 2 to 3 minutes, which, to be honest, she probably should be running through all these girls in 2 to 3 minutes. Her striking, I just don't think there's much there. We haven't seen her face any resistance back her way. She's got a little bit of pop. She landed that nice break kick in the clinch in one of her fights, flatlining a girl. But overall, I mean, we still don't know much about her striking offensively or defensively. Grappling-wise, she's obviously, that's kind of been her bread and butter and being able to have a lot of success where she's landed some nice takedowns from the body lock and whatnot, once again, under the context of fighting girls who are just incapable wrestler grapplers. But even in that, like, there's been a lot of scenarios too for her where like she's not even really landing takedowns and she's kind of just like falling on top of these girls too. So I'm not really willing to say her like offensive wrestling is anything special either. And like I said, on top, she's obviously shown some good ground and pound components, but like her top game offensive grappling does not appear to be very good. Like she's kind of attempting like low percentage, like key locks and shit like that, where girls, even at that level, she should probably finish with. Like, I think she could have easily submitted a lot of these girls, but she hasn't really been able to. So that's a bit of a red flag from like a grappling perspective. And then defensively, we just really have no clue, right? I don't think she's ever really been on bottom. So I don't want to sit there and make a blanket statement that she's bad on bottom or can't guard sub anybody or can't work back to her feet. Like I genuinely don't know. We have like pretty much no data, let alone against a good fighter at the same time. But one thing I did notice is that there's been times where girls have been able to get to body locks on her like pretty easily. They just don't have any wrestling prowess to take her down where she's able to like kind of throw into them or turn reverse and then, land her takedowns of her own. But girls can close distance on her pretty easy. So like, that's my thing with Egger. Like she's not really that good overall, right? She's a pretty one-dimensional fighter, but I think she's pretty good in her dimension. Obviously meritocratically from both her background and just being a more established UFC fighter at this point in time. So my take is like, given the historic success of Perez, is she going to be able to go out there and just like land body lock takedowns on a judo world champion? I don't really think so. I mean, she could, I guess, but I just don't think there's a ton of merit to that. And we've seen Egger be pretty strong from top position. So I think Egger being a moderate favorite makes sense. However, from some perspective, I do understand the steam coming in towards Perez if you're kind of just playing into the general variance of it. And under the guise that Stephanie Egger, there's probably a decent chance she shouldn't be minus 300 over most girls because she is one-dimensional at the end of the day. Her striking's fucking terrible. Like if you told me that these girls like grappling canceled each other out for whatever reason and this was just a range striking a match, like, I mean, Stephanie Egger isn't minus 300 in that scenario. So I do think it's probably a dog or pass situation, but there's a very real chance where Egger easily covers her price tag too, just throws the girl, takes her down and subs her without much issue. She has no bottom game at all too. So complete pass spot for me. I will kind of play into the general variance in certain scenarios similar to this, but this one, not for me. This girl thinks she's the second coming of Christ. And from what I've seen, I don't think she's very good. So, big questions answered and a big step up in competition nonetheless. I kind of think like Egger positional TKO, something along those lines is probably fair. Maybe a sub two, just because we don't know what her defensive grappling is like. So that's my take on the first fight. Second fight, we got Khalid Taha taking on Christian Quinones. I'll kick this one off. No real strong opinion for me. I think the general market has pretty much all come in on Quinones, and I get it from some perspective that obviously the run of Khalid Taha has not been particularly encouraging, but I think you really have to factor in like his strength of competition and who he's been fighting. Like he's fought really strong wrestler, grappler archetypes throughout it. And so I think people are just like looking at the fact that, yeah, Quinones has had some takedown success. He's had some top base success. He's going to be able to duplicate and have that same amount of success as really strong wrestler grapplers that are established at the UFC level. I think that's possible, but I think it's somewhat wishful thinking at the same time too. And Taha hits like a fucking truck, man. Like I said, like people kind of just cherry pick his UFC run and say like this and that, but it's like, is Christian Quinones the caliber of guys that Khalid Taha has fought? Not really sure about that. Like I think on general volume, that's where I think Quinones is interesting because we have seen him be more aggressive. He might even be a bit more technical, but we have seen him knocked out before. We've seen him hurt multiple times. We've seen him actually finished in all three of his pro losses. Taha is incredibly durable. He's shown to be a sound defensive grappler. He's tough to get out of there. So I don't know. It's getting to the point where like if Taha gets to like plus money and this line flips, honestly, I might take the shot on Taha. But how I'm really looking to go about it is just take a shot on like Taha inside the distance or by knockout at like big plus money. He's almost an exclusive finisher. He's a guy who's going to go out there and maximize his win equity against a guy in Quinones who I think Taha can force into a brawl personally. And we've seen Quinones hurt multiple times. So step up for Quinones at the end of the day, step down for Taha. I think it's an okay spot for Taha with the right game plan, but it's definitely a difficult fight to assess just based on historics of both guys. What do you think, Legs?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. And what you brought up about it is like the finish reliant. I feel like with Taha, like, and that's kind of where I draw the line. Like to me, I feel like Taha is fairly KO reliant in a lot of spots. Like especially in this spot in particular, like I could see Quinones' volume, the leg kicks be a huge success for him. To me, I feel like if it goes 15 minutes, it's a battle of that versus the power of Taha. But like you said, I think Taha can catch this guy. I don't think his defensive tendencies are all that great. I think if I was going to play Taha, though, his no scorecards line is like minus 130. I think that's not bad. Personally, I have no interest in this fight, though. It's a pass for me, but I like the Taha side.
Yeah, I didn't see that line. I think no scorecards on Taha at minus 130 there. That's actually probably just the best play of the fight overall, I would say. I might actually.
Yeah, let me check that again real quick. I'm on DK, but that's what last time I saw that was minus.
Yeah, I think that's
minus 130.
Yeah, I think that's a great play. I mean, the guy
minus 135 on DK now.
Yeah, I mean, the guy survived, did like a crazy amount of barrages from Barcelos. I think he survived like back mount with him on his back, and he's like a black belt in jiu-jitsu, obviously higher level too. So I think that's pretty interesting. But yeah, not a bad look there, dude. All right, next fight we got Benoit Denis taking on Gabriel Miranda. What do you got here, Legs?
Well, I think it's another fight where the big underdog isn't UFC caliber. I think Miranda's your classic like opportunistic submission guy, and he kind of needs to do it early. Like there's not a ton of film of the guy of recent years, and there's not really a ton of tape of him striking either. Like I think after the like 7.5 minute mark, I think this guy's going to face he will face a ton of adversity. The cardio's not there. I think Saint Denis can grind this guy out if he doesn't get subbed early, which I don't know. I don't rate Denis like all that particularly. Like seeing him at minus 300 just kind of gives me like a big pause. But like I feel like Miranda's win conditions all in that first round. So pass for me. I think Saint Denis probably grinds him out.
Yeah, this is the one fight I didn't really do much into because I think we only have like one fight available for Miranda in like the last 7 years or something like that. Despite like having a lot of pro experience, there just really isn't a ton of tape on him. But in the little bit I watched, he kind of seems like your prototypical Brazilian kitchen sink jiu-jitsu type of guy. You know, a little bit, I wouldn't say kill or re-kill because he's obviously never been finished before, but we'll see kind of how that, like how he fights kind of leads him into that archetype at a UFC level, at least for me. And obviously he's coming in on short notice. Saint Denis, grinder, works in a taxing base pace, obviously heavy top game. I think Miranda can probably make this a little interesting early, but I don't trust his gas tank in this type of a fight. We know Benoit Saint Denis tough as shit. He's going to push a pretty taxing pace at the same time. Can he sub Miranda? Like I said, it's kind of hard to say. Obviously, I think it's like 8 of 9 for Saint Denis by sub and like 15 of 16 by Miranda by sub, but they've never been finished before. So it's kind of like auto, like, you know, fight doesn't go the distance. But it's like I always have just a little bit of pause in those scenarios when you have two fighters who have never been finished before and you're laying like a super, super chalky price to do so. But I do think the fight probably does finish in most scenarios. I guess instead of like laying an uber chalky price on Saint Denis, because I do still think there are question marks on the Miranda side, I'd probably just rather like take pops on Saint Denis in like rounds 2, round 3, because I think when they're dry and when Miranda's fresh, like I said, he's obviously a competent grappler, at least in that realm. He probably is fine in one, most likely, but I think that pace of Saint Denis probably gets to him at a certain point. I wouldn't get too cute with the sub, and I would actually kind of more lean to like a positional TKO. Like it could be a scenario of like a Gelton Almeida versus Danilo Marquez, if you remember that fight. Both me and you, Lags, we hit on that Almeida KO prop at like plus 300 or something, where like maybe Marquez, you know, isn't anything special. He isn't anything good, but his jiu-jitsu is like good enough to not like get his back taken or not get finished potentially in the grappling realm. But Saint Denis can still gain like dominant positions on him at the same time and just probably pound him out. That's kind of what my thought process is here. Like I said, it's kind of a leap because I still don't know much about Miranda. Like Saint Denis could definitely sub him too, 100%. I just don't know. But yeah, I'd probably, instead of ponying up for 300 on Saint Denis, because I'm kind of with you as well. I still think Saint Denis is a little overrated in a lot of ways. There still are a lot of red flags with his game. At the same time, he's still reasonably green in terms of his overall MMA career. So I'm not really willing to sit there and pony up this price for him with some of the question marks, but I'd rather just look to, take a violence approach or take some of those late prop stabs on Saint Denis at bigger plus numbers, because I think that does come through at the end of the day. All right. Next fight, we got Nassourdine Imavov taking on Joaquin Buckley. What do you got here, Legs?
This is the one this week where I didn't have like too strong of a read, and just kind of, to me, I just feel like Imavov, much bigger, more precise striker, probably can't have a ton of grappling success on Buckley, but just much better technical striking game. I think he stays safe from knockout shots of Buckley. I think Buckley's cardio is not that great. I feel like an Imavov late finish is probably on the cards, if not a dominant decision, to be honest. But I really wouldn't be laying. I think it's minus 275, minus 280 on Imavov. Like, it's just a pass for me.
Yeah, it's definitely not a fight I'm clamoring to play. I haven't been as high on Imavov as most people have been, which obviously is not necessarily aged well in the sense that guys like 3-1 or so, but like even in watching his overall career, I should say his overall career, and then factoring in his UFC career as well. Like my point is, it has not been all roses for Imavov. Like, you go back to the Jordan Williams fight, like he was hurt significantly in the first round by Williams. The Hawes fight, he obviously got stuck against the fence for 11 minutes, taken down and controlled on the ground a little bit there. Granted, Phil Hawes, big, strong, physical dude, strong collegiate wrestling background. I understand it, but still, severely struggled in that fight. The Heinisch fight was probably, I would say, his best performance, where Heinisch kind of struggled to close distance, just threw a bunch of empty kicks at him. He was the much sharper striker, obviously able to eventually put him down with that knee and finish on the ground. But even the Edmund fight, like, he dropped the first round unanimously to Edmund as well. Obviously, but we know at this point, Edmund has about 5 minutes of cardio. And after that, Imavov was able to take over the fight. My point being is, like, he's not really like dominating people overall. And like I said, I still have questions with him getting stuck against the fence. I still think he can be susceptible when coming into the pocket at times. There's still, like, I generally like Imavov, but I still think there are some like concerns with his general game in terms of how it like translates to Buckley. The issue I've always had with him is that he's pretty hook reliant and he's pretty reckless when he enters the pocket. He doesn't always disguise his shots well. I think he looked a lot better in that realm against Duraev, but Duraev is obviously a wrestler grappler by base and not a primary striker, which needs to be noted. And I think Imavov kind of just has, as per his nickname, those sniper-like tendencies where I don't necessarily think it's going to be easy for Buckley to just bull his way into the pocket. I think he's probably going to be getting hit with counter shots, and he probably gets knocked out in the process, to be honest. At the same time, like minute to minute, exchange to exchange, Buckley is going to come forward. He is going to throw hammers. We have seen him wrestle a little bit more. If he can make this a dirty fight, even, implement some elements to the Phil Hawes fight, stick him against the cage for, a couple minutes here and there, grind on him, throw some big shit. Like, I think Buckley can close the margins in this fight potentially. Like I said, I just think he's at a technical deficiency. I think he's probably at a speed deficiency as well. And I think, he's going to be eating counter shots when he's coming in against Imavov. So that's my official prediction. I do think Imavov puts him down at the end of the day, but if this goes a full 15 minutes, I'm not really convinced that Imavov covers his price tag in that scenario personally. So I think it's a dogger pass. I think the line is starting to get a bit out there, and I am starting to gain some interest into Buckley personally, despite me thinking he gets knocked out here, because this line is starting to get a little bit too up there for me on a guy who, at the end of the day, I know is in most scenarios going to be aggressive and force his primary path to close margins. So that is my take there. Next fight, we got Fares Ziam taking on Michal Figlak. I just have not been a big fan of Ziam over the years. I think his positive attributes are that he's obviously a technical kickboxer, very long, very big for the division, utilizes his tools largely pretty well, but there's also just a lot of red flags with his game. Like the best way to describe him, he's just a low volume outside point fighter. That's what he is. But in playing that game well to some capacity, he doesn't have like the volume of a Wonder Boy Thompson or something like that. And he's going to be going backwards in the majority of his fights. And I think a guy like Figlak, who obviously is making his debut here, but everything I've seen from him on tape appears to be pretty solid. He just appears to be an extremely well-rounded fighter. He comes forward pretty consistently. He cuts the cage off well. He pushes a consistent pace. He's shown wrestling competency when he gets on top of guys. He's not like devastating with submissions or ground and pound, but he does enough to keep fights on the ground, rack up minutes there. And so I just haven't really seen many chinks in his game yet. His durability has held up. I haven't seen any problems with his defensive grappling. I haven't seen any problems with his cardio yet. Obviously, this is a step up in competition at the end of the day. But then again, Ziam doesn't push any pace. Ziam doesn't wrestle. Ziam hasn't been a perennial knockout artist at the same time either. So it's like, I'm not saying that Ziam can't win this fight. All I'm just saying is I think his ceiling is just like a close, greasy split decision. And even in that scenario of where he can make this fight closer, I still think he loses on optics. Like, let's say he's like ever so slightly getting the better of the striking in the fight. Figlak's going to be the one going forward who's still going to be throwing volume at the end of the day. And I think that's ultimately what is going to get him the nod done in that particular, like, worst case Figlak scenario. And then the ground is obviously very important here too, where Ziam's first level takedown defense, I think, is actually pretty decent. The problem is when he's taken down, he gets controlled extensively. We saw him essentially just get really frustrated against Terrence McKinney when he couldn't do much. He pretty much just gave his back to him. McKinney took it and subbed him. We obviously saw him get controlled extensively in his debut. We saw him struggle at points against Malarkey. The overwhelming majority of MMA Twitter, MMA media, people thought that Jamie Malarkey won that fight. When Luigi Vendramini decided to actually go forward and do things, what the fuck happened? He significantly hurt for SCM and won that round as well. So it's like, I'm always a little weary, about these younger guys, undefeated, less than 10 pro fights, debut coming in, because we know these guys can be overvalued and they can underperform in certain spots. But based on the style dynamic, I just think it's a pretty tough matchup for SCM personally. So I like Figlak to win a comfortable, unanimous decision personally. What do you think, Lags?
Yeah, I'll say for first, it's like more of a sit back and watch type spot for me, because I'm glad you mentioned it with like the optics on the feet, because like I think we'll both agree that Ziam is the more technical striker, but I think the optics of Figlak coming forward, throwing those leg kicks hard, he's just always coming forward, throwing volume. I think that will obviously play in a huge favor in him, and obviously he has a huge grappling edge when he goes to it. So to me, big favorite Figlak again, kind of makes sense. And what's actually kind of interesting is Figlak ITD is like plus 400. I was seeing the under 2.5 is like plus 250, which I feel like is kind of interesting. Doesn't go on FanDuel, was plus 250.
All right, let's move on. We got our battle of satellite Germans of Dustin Stoltzfus and Magomedov. I guess I will kick this one off here. I think Magomedov fucks Stoltzfus up. To be honest, I think it's a pretty horrible matchup for Stoltzfus. I would say the one advantage I would give to him in the fight is I think he's probably a better submission grappler than Magomedov is, but there are so many red flags on the Stoltzfus side. He's getting outlanded by a low volume Dwight Grant. He's getting jabbed into oblivion by jiu-jitsu ace Adolfo Vieira, who busted him up bad and competed actually really competitively on minutes and at distance in that fight. We've obviously seen him struggle with the takedowns at points. We've seen him make mistakes in terms of the defensive grappling. Magomedov comes from a wrestling background. He can wrestle. He's shown he can do it. And I think honestly, if he does, he'll be positionally fine on the mat here. But I think really just the big difference in this fight is the stand-up. I think he has some Russian coast elements, but I think he's a bit higher volume than the traditional Russian coaster. And the guy hits incredibly hard, has power in both his feet and his hands. I think he managed his distance largely pretty well. And so given some of the guys that have given Stoltzfus standing on the feet, I don't see why Magomedov doesn't have really much issue here. I think he most likely knocks Stoltzfus out. I know Stoltzfus has been durable throughout the course of his career, but I think Magomedov's a pretty big middleweight. He's finished, I think, 13 of his 24 pro wins via strikes. I think just that general game is going to frustrate Stoltzfus, and I think the overall pressure and diversity of attack from Magomedov gets to Stoltzfus, and he goes out and knocks Mr. Stoltzfus out. What do you think, Legs?
Yeah, don't disagree on Magomedov clearly winning this fight, but to me, I have a lot of question marks on him in general. Like you mentioned, he's got good power on the feet, but I think his pace is pretty shit standing personally. And in terms of the grappling, he's not a guy that's really going to be diving on legs. He's got decent grappling, wrestling, don't get me wrong. But again, it's just like the pacing in general of his fights isn't great, but the dude's got solid power on the feet. So honestly, I think this is a good matchup for him. I just don't think Stoltzfus presents a ton of threats, really, to be honest.
All right. Next fight, we have the MMA gambling Twitter war of the week. We got Charles Jourdain taking on Nathaniel Wood. What do you got, Legs?
Not a super passionate take myself, but I like the Wood side personally. I just feel like he has a little bit more upside and more tools to win the fight. I feel like on the feet, yeah, Jourdain has the higher finishing ability, but Wood, in my opinion, has the volume, has solid leg kicks to mix in as well, has grappling upside as well to mix that in if he pursues that heavily. To me, I just feel like Wood should be lined probably that slight favorite, but I'm not clamoring to play Wood like where the line currently. Like it's one of those fights where I don't have a super strong read on the fight, so it's just more of a pass for me.
Yeah, this is one I've kind of flip-flopped back and forth on, which is why I'm not betting the fight. I think the fight being like competitively lined makes sense to me. I've honestly been higher on Wood, I guess, in general in comparison to Jourdain, but it's an interesting spot, right? Because this is going to be Wood's second fight at 145 pounds. I think in general, him moving to 145 is probably a good long-term move in the sense that, you know, he just had really bad cuts to 135, but against bigger hitters at 145, I think that's where my big issues lie with Wood, because despite him being technical offensively, despite him being potent offensively, despite him keeping a high work rate offensively, despite him being dangerous offensively, his defense is just a component of his game that he has not really improved on at all, in my opinion, over a decent sample size. And if you guys are familiar with his Cage Warriors run too, I mean, he got hurt a lot. And then we obviously saw him get hurt by John Dotson and knocked out later in that fight as well. I just think Jourdain's probably the biggest hitter that Wood has fought to date, where I generally think based on like exchange to exchange, the striking's probably pretty competitive, but I think there's a pretty decent sized power edge for Jourdain here. But I think where Wood also gets interesting in the fight is with the wrestling and the grappling, right? I think Jourdain only does takedowns at 51%. We've seen Wood, you know, pursue in that realm. We've seen him show submission competency in the UFC, even back regionally. My thing with Jourdain, despite his takedown defense, though, historically, he's been pretty difficult to hold down, really outside of the most recent fight with Burgos, who was able to backpack him. In general, he's pretty scrambly. So I'm not necessarily convinced that even if Wood pursues the wrestling, that he's going to be able to hold Jourdain down. He very well could. I mean, it's just not a component I have like a particularly strong read on. But another question I have, is Wood going to go, you know, aggressive in the wrestling and the grappling too? That's just not, I think he could, but it's not something I have any conviction on. Like he only lands like I think one takedown per 15 minutes in the UFC to date. So he's not necessarily a guy who is diving on legs too. So I don't know. It's a spot I think there's substantial arguments for both sides as to why either are value. I wouldn't shit on anybody betting Wood. Honestly, I wouldn't shit on anybody betting Jourdain. But I think a fight being this dynamic of a fight being lined competitively just makes sense to me. So I don't really think there's value there.
Throw in the narrative too of the French Canadian fighting in Paris as well.
Yeah, there you go. Might have a little hometown cooking for Mr. Quebec in Jourdain. I don't even know if he's from Quebec. That was a complete assumption on my part. All right, and so here we go. Now we got a battle of I wouldn't say a homegrown French fighter because I think he's from Senegal originally, but we got William Gomis taking on the Dutchman Jarno Errens. Kind of an interesting spot, as this was a card overall that was just riddled with cancellations and pullouts, and it was just kind of like a last minute throw together. I think within like 3-ish or so weeks. Was not familiar with either guy, knew absolutely nothing about either guy, but there was a decent amount of tape out there on both, I think, where we can get, a decent gauge on where both guys are at. Gomis is kind of interesting on the feet. He's not a guy who's going to go out there and pump volume. And in fact, he's probably average to lower volume standing, but he kind of has those physical intangibles to play the range game largely pretty effectively. Doesn't have a ton of knockouts, but is explosive, athletic, limits exchanges. When guys kind of really start to come in on him, they might hit him clean once, but then he kind of just goes, grabs up a clinch, stays there, rinses and repeats, or kind of works his grappling. So he's kind of hard to look good against on the feet. Errens, I would say, his pacing is more consistent. Might be a bit more technical, might be a bit more live to technically win minutes in this fight. But like I said, I don't think Gomis is really going to get into some sort of barn burner with him. And if he does kind of come aggro and aggressive, I think Gomis just kind of goes out and locks up the clinch. But really the big difference in the fight is the floor, right? Where Gomis has shown pretty consistently to go to the wrestling and the grappling, where he's shown to be strong from top position, landing ground and pound, where Errens has been taken down pretty consistently throughout the course of his career. He has an aggressive guard, but it's kind of like after a minute or so, it's kind of like I don't want to say he doesn't know what to do, but he's just kind of reliant to get controlled after that point, outside of him like sweeping the one Russian in that one fight. But that was also a fight he would have lost, by the way, if he did not sweep him in the third round. And he would actually be riding a 2-fight losing skid if he did not sweep the Russian guy in the third round. Just something important to know. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think that's the big difference in the fight. Gomis, much higher wrestling upside to control, win minutes, potentially finish. Am I laying over 2-1 on him? No, I think the line might in fact be just a little bit wide potentially, but yeah, I think it's kind of directionally correct on a guy who's going to attempt takedowns, strong from top position, a guy who's consistently dropped minutes rounds on bottom throughout the course of his career so that's my general take. Gomis, maybe ground and pound finish. Gomis decisions, the take.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you as well. Like Aaron's, the takedown defense is just such a liability to like, I don't really rate his chances much, to be honest. I'm shocked that this fight is even like on the main card, to be honest with you, which is kind of funny. Like I feel like we could probably put the Imavov Buckley fight up there. I feel like it's more like a contender series type of fight, but I feel like Gomis has the advantages striking as well as taking this fight to the ground. So should be dominant decision for him, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think they wanted another Frenchman. So they have Jourdain, who's like the satellite Quebec Frenchman. Then they got Gomis, and then they got Gane. Honestly, I think that's honestly just why they did it.
You see, what about Makdessi? You have Makdessi in there. You have that and the Chirico fight in there too. I feel like you could switch the Kopylov the Chirico fight with Imavov.
Is Makdessi from Quebec?
Let me look exactly. I have Tapology pulled up here. Nova Scotia.
Yeah, so he's not French, most likely. I could be wrong about that, but
yeah.
All right. Speaking of Mr. John Makdessi, I know this is a fight that me and you are probably going to have some similar opinions on. Off the top, start off with our boy John Makdessi. I think in doing this podcast with you boys for like the last 2 to 3 years. I think cashing on John Makdessi as an underdog against Ignacio Bahamondes might have been one of our best round table club and sub bets I think we've ever made.
I think the only one, I was going to interject you real quick. I think the only one, in my opinion, maybe was Jack Shore over Montel Jackson. Or not Brett Johns. Brett Johns over Montel. Sorry, Brett Johns over Montel.
Yeah, that was like, we get like plus 230 or something on that.
Yeah.
That was a good one as well. But I know you have a decent opinion on this fight. I'll let you kick this one off, dude.
Yeah, so I was on Makdessi, like we talked about in the last fight, money line and by decision, and I was actually on something in Haqparast last fight. I was on Bobby Green by decision, plus 190. And, I kind of feel like, in my opinion, Makdessi kind of presents similar issues as Bobby Green. Like, he's a guy who's going to spam volume if he's conscious across 15 minutes. And it's like, I feel like his kicking game as well on the feet presents Haqparast issues. I mean, we've just kind of seen in general, he's been fairly hesitant. And I feel like Hack can kind of give him that volume pressure game that'll give him that hesitant vibes. I feel like if this fight goes 15 minutes, I love Makdessi's chances. I just think that if you put that, unless you think Haqparast's chances of KOing are that high, the money line just doesn't make a ton of sense. So small play on John for me at plus 190.
Yeah, I haven't done anything on this one yet just because it seems like the Haqparast money keeps coming in. So I think I'm probably going to get a better price on Makdessi. So I'm kind of just sitting cool on it. It's not like a passionate take or anything for me. It's just honestly a line-based principled bet where I think the line's off and me having like supreme degree of confidence in John Makdessi. Like, if you really look at like Haqparast W's, they're just not like great overall, right? Like, he beat a wrestler in Munoz, a short notice Rafa Garcia, Neto BJJ jiu-jitsu guy, Thibaut Gauti, fellow Frenchman who proved not to be a UFC caliber fighter. And his best W is probably Mark Jacasey, but that was 2018. Also Mark Jacasey, and we know Mark Jacasey's been pretty flaky throughout the course of his career. Mark Jacasey just did a whole fuck lot of nothing in that fight, and honestly gave Haqparast just really a good fight for him to succeed. So people look at them like, oh, fuck, Haqparast beat Mark Jacasey. Look at what Mark Jacasey's doing right now. Excellent benchmark. It's like, well, go back and watch that fight. Mark didn't want to fight that night. So it was kind of an easy day at the office for Haqparast. And my general thing with Makdessi is, despite him being 37, despite him being undersized at the weight class, he's just not an easy guy to look good against for quite a few reasons, right? Like, he's going to throw a ton of volume. He can play a more patient game. He can play a more aggressive game. He can play a tactical game. He can play a point fighting game. He's defended distance strikes at a pretty decent rate. He defends takedowns at like 89%. I think he's only been taken down a couple times in the last decade or so, right? So people aren't, having any ground success. If you're beating John Makdessi, you're beating him on the feet. And so really where John's gotten blown out of the water is when he's gotten caught with, big kicks. I think it was Lando and Cowboy that caught him with kicks who we know have been dynamic kickers throughout the course of their career. Like, those are really the guys that have went out there and just kind of blew Makdessi out of the water. But in a very long sample size, Makdessi is not getting blown out of the water by many guys, even in losses. And so that's my thing with Haqparast. Well, one, Haqparast does not kick at all. And that's how Makdessi's getting knocked out historically, right? So that's important to note. But Haqparast has just been flaky, and I think Makdessi has a game to make this fight close. And, when you're talking about a plus 200 price tag, do you need to have any supreme degree of confidence in your guy winning the fight? It's like, no. All I'm asking out of a plus 200 fighter is to go out there and make a competitive fight. And that's what I think he can do here. I think I'll lean to Haqparast, and the fight makes sense probably based on youth, power, optics. I get it. But Makdessi, like I said, is pretty good defensively and has shown he can fight fire with a fucking beanpole who was much younger, because that was the take everybody had in the Bahamondes fight. Bahamondes 6'3", 70 fuck whatever inch reach. Makdessi old, blah, 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 blah. He's going to struggle. And he went out there and fucking beat that guy. Whatever. And so I've just also heard kind of some similar takes this week. Obviously, Haqparast is a better fighter than Bahamondes. I can see that. But I've still heard people take the same approach. Makdessi, he's 37. Haqparast is bigger. It's like, bro, people have been using that same shit for John Makdessi for years now, right? Like the guy's defied that. Like I said, even in losses, he's fought these guys competitively. So it's like, can we get the like youth narrative out of here? Can we get the size narrative out of here? Because John Makdessi's proven, I don't want to say that's bullshit. That's not necessarily true, but using that as an overt reason to say that you love Nasrat Haqparast in this fight is a really stupid fucking argument, in my opinion, and that's proven. So I think John can make this close. Probably going to be a split decision-y type of fight, plus 200 on a split decision-y type of fight. I'm willing to get involved in that all day.
Yeah, I think what's kind of interesting just about the narrative, like in general, that like everybody thinks like, oh, he catches Makdessi. It's like, well, the over 2.5 is minus 220. Like Haqparast by KO on FanDuel at least is plus 350. Like I would much rather be holding a plus 350 than a minus 230. But,
right, because and that's a good point, right? Because if Haqparast wins and is able to cover a what is he now, like 230, 240?
Yeah, 230.
So if he wins and he covers that, he probably has to hurt Makdessi. He probably has to finish Makdessi. If he doesn't, like, I mean, let me know your thoughts. Does Haqparast cover that in many scenarios in a decision?
I don't expect a dominant type of decision from Nasrat personally.
Like I said, that's just my thing at the end of the day.
This doesn't make sense.
I think the easy way to sum this up is I think Makdessi has a better chance of covering his price tag than Haqparast does. I think that's just a really simplistic way to look at it. Granted, the guy's 37. He's gotten a ton of injuries. These guys can just fall off of a fucking cliff, at any point. And maybe he does here, right? I mean, but at the end of the day, I think the guy's like 3-1 in his last 4, right? So not really a strong evidentiary basis there. So hashtag Club and Sub podcast on hashtag the Bull.
And the fourth fight was a close fight with Trinaldo, who is tough to look good against anyways.
Yeah, well, nobody looks good against Trinaldo, right? Like, yeah, so that's a good point as well. All right, here we go. We got Alessio Di Chirico taking on Roman Kopylov. This is, I think, the most competitively lined fight on the entire card, and for good reason. Both of these guys are fighters I would classify as commodities you really don't want to invest in overall, just based on their fighting styles. Di Chirico, low volume. Kopylov, low volume. I would give Kopylov probably a technical striking advantage in this fight. I would give ground advantages to Di Chirico in this fight. I would give him experience advantages in this fight. But that's just the problem with both of these guys. Their pacing is just so inconsistent in their fights. Like, I actually think Di Chirico is a decent fighter. Like, if you told me he just threw like 2 to 3 more distance strikes per minute, there's multiple of these fights that he's lost that he very well could have won, right? But we just have this like long sample with him where he just kind of like fights in bursts where he'll be aggressive in a round and he won't be aggressive in a round, or he'll be just very tepid, overall. And so that's ultimately my thing. Like, at a pick'em price tag, you want to be able to establish like something definitive in some capacity for either guy. And there just really isn't that here. Because like I said, I think you can make the argument that Kopilov's value based on him being a better technical striker. I think you can make the argument for Di Chirico being value because Kopylov has looked like dog shit on bottom. He nearly got finished by Derive. Overall, no shame. There's Derive's a pretty good wrestler, grappler. But the guy also just got fucking, easily passed back taken by Carl Roberson, who we know has looked like the drizzling shits in terms of the grappling throughout the course of his UFC career. So to sit there and get your back taken by that guy without much issue, not a great look. So it's like my thing, if Di Chirico comes out here, puts on a singlet, and aggressively wrestles, I don't expect Kopylov to sit there and tip down from, TDAs. He's actually shown some pretty good first level takedown defense, but it's just like when he's been on bottom, he looks lost, right? And we've just seen better top components from Di Chirico. But yeah, like I said, in general, I don't know who's betting a money line on this fight. Like this is the main 1-800-GAMBLER fight on the card from money line perspective. However, I do think there could be some viability in the total here on anti-violence in overs, right? Like we've seen obviously finishing components of Kopylov. I think he's finished all of his pro wins. We obviously saw him drop Duraev, get almost finished by Duraev. We saw him get finished by Roberson. So it's like Kopylov, there's actually been pretty much there's one finishing sequence in all of his fights. However, given the style clash of both of them, I just think it's going to be a tepid, low volume affair, right? So I think you're getting minimal overall exchanges to extend minutes here. Like I said, my primary concern would be more from the Chirico wrestles and is able to get into dominant position. But at the same time, Chirico significantly struggled with control pretty much throughout his entire career. So it wouldn't be a large play, but I think like anti-violence on the overs fight goes, I think it's around like 60%. Gun to my head, I think that's how I'd go about it. What do you think, Legs?
That's actually what I do have. I have a 1 unit play on the goes the distance minus 160. Yeah. So again, coming into the week, I was looking at playing Chirico and then like watching the Cummings fight again, like another low volume southpaw. It's like, well, that's exactly what we're getting here. He's not really stepping his foot on the gas, not really trying to mix up in the grappling a ton. I don't know. It's just kind of a mixed bag, really, on both sides. So I think playing goes the distance, like you said. I think it's a low volume, tepid, striking affair. I think minus 160 is probably great price.
Don't hate it. I did not know you played that, so I guess we are kind of in lockstep in that thinking as well. What I will say, I don't know how you staked that, but I still would play it small because there is some flakiness with both guys. But in general, I do think, based on how they both match up, I think it is a fight that probably should hit the cards like 2 out of every 3 times, around there.
I have a unit on it, minus 160.
Perfect. I think that's a good look. All right, on to our co-main event of the evening in a much better fight overall. We have Robert Whittaker taking on Marvin Vettori. What do you think, Legs?
Much better fight, but I kind of have, just as little to say, to be honest. I feel like this is a solid fight for Rob. I don't expect Marvin to really outstrike Rob. And nobody has, other than Israel Adesanya. In terms of the grappling, I don't expect him to have any success really. I think Rob's a pretty solid anti-grappler. So to me, I think Rob by decision plus 100. I have a unit and a half on that. I think that's a solid look. Vettori's elite durability. He's going to come forward. I get that, but in terms of striking, I expect Rob to blow him out of the water personally.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you as well. And it's interesting because we saw actually a really big market surge towards Vettori, I think either last night or 2 nights ago.
It actually still is, real quick. It actually still is. So I think it's minus 210 for the most part on a decent amount of the books now, minus 220.
Yeah, so there definitely is a large segment, or at least a segment of people who are putting some cash down to move it, because I think the original drop was 25 to 30 cents. Obviously, it's earlier in Fight League, so I mean nothing, not a million James Krause dollars or anything moving it. That was my one barb. I'm like, I had to say it, but I mean, obviously there is a group and a segment that respect Vettori, and it's just kind of interesting to me because I've always been a Vettori fan. I've backed him in a lot of matchups. I've made a decent chunk of change betting Vettori. I think Vettori is a guy who's going to go out there and beat probably 95% of this division. But X's and O's wise, stats wise, this just is not a good matchup for him. Like, Vettori's a guy who needs to just walk forward, get off on volume, and kind of bully guys. It's like, how many guys have really been able to go out there and do that to Whittaker? I think maybe the fairest comparison would be to like a Jared Cannonier, in which Whittaker still won that 29-28 reasonably comfortably. Like, the fight was somewhat competitive, but I thought he still won that reasonably comfortably. And Cannonier also hits much harder than Vettori. Yeah. I think that also needs to be noted. And so it's a problem because people talk about, Whittaker, he's been knocked out a couple of times. He's been hurt multiple times. But it's like Vettori can't really bust a grape. You're like, oh, he dropped Jack Hermanson. It's like, Well, Jack Hermanson has been hurt by not the best of guys in the past as well, too, which needs to be noted. My point is that like Rob is not going to give Vettori the type of fight he needs to succeed, right? He's not just going to stand in front of him and let him get off on volume for free. I mean, Rob's one of the better defensive fighters, like minute to minute in the division, who dictates the striking on his terms. And I think that's what we generally see here. It's been those footwork, lateral movement, blitz type of guys historically that have given Vettori the biggest issues. And that's just the box that Rob's checked. You know, obviously Vettori has shown offensive wrestling capabilities, grappling capabilities, but Rob's one of the best takedown defenders in the division, and very few guys have been able to have extended success on it. Even, you know, people touch on the Romero fight, but obviously Romero's an Olympic level wrestler who still struggled with like overall ground control, and Rob blew his knee in one of the fights, you know, as well, which needs to be noted at the same time. I don't see the historic minute winning ability for Vettori that he's had in the past in this fight in both realms. I think Rob is one of the few guys in the division who is just a great kryptonite to the game of Marvin Vettori. Like I said, I think Vettori beats like 95% of the division because he's durable, he's got cardio, he's got output, he can wrestle, he can grapple, he's proven it at a high level. But it's like there are a handful of guys in this division that I just think are a bad style matchup for him. And I think that's here with Whitaker. To your point, I think the decision play is a good look. Vettori, brick of the head, never been finished. He's even eaten flush head kick knockouts, which we've seen obviously Whitaker have some success with those actions too. So probably not the spot for a Whitaker knockout, but I like Whitaker on minutes. I like him to stay upright. I think it's a decent fight for him. So I like Whitaker as well. Any last things to add there, Legs?
I guess I will say people are saying, you know, oh, Whitaker's chin doesn't look great. I mean, they have Vettori knockout at 12-1. If you fancy that, you really think the power's there. But yeah, no, I don't think he can bust a grape, to your point.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen Whitaker face bigger hitters before too, right? It's not like he's getting the only guy to knock him out at 185 is Adesanya, right? But he's fought bigger hitters in the past by maybe being hurt in a couple occasions. It's the only guy to finish him. So
and not to throw like a ton of narrative into it too, but like it was like the first Adesanya fight, like where mentally Rob wasn't like all there great either, but like, yeah.
He also fought him kind of like an idiot too, where we obviously saw a much better tactical game plan from Rob in the second fight, which ultimately forced a closer fight, right, too. So I think that's a good point on your side too, Legs. All right, our main event of the evening, not a polarizing fight by any means. I think everybody's kind of in lockstep on this one, but we got Ciryl Gane taking on the surging Tai Tuivasa, where if you told me 2 to 3 years ago that Tai Tuivasa would be number 5 in the heavyweight division, probably would have told you you're nuts. But at the end of the day, props to the guy. He has proven his worth at the end of the day and is now sitting on the precipice of a title shot. So what do you think about this one, Legs?
That's what's crazy, and that's why I love it in general. I'm rooting for Tai in general just because like it's crazy that Tai is one fight away really here, I feel like, from a title shot. But yeah, to me, I feel like his winning equity is pretty much an early knockout here. I think Gane technically is going to pick him apart. I think the cardio disparity, I think the grappling disparity here is so wide that Gane can get a finish either standing or on the ground. I know he's not like super proactive wrestler. I get that, but Tai's bottom game is so tragic that I feel like if one takedown, like as soon as he gets the fight to the mat, I think the fight could be over there. So to me, I have a small play on the fight doesn't start round 4 at -135. I have a unit on that. Personally, just feel like Gane can finish the fight standing, finish the fight on the ground, and I think there is a small win equity for Tai as well in the first round.
Yeah, so this is kind of where we had a little bit of our dissension in the group chat, just a tad, not in the sense that I'm the Tai truther or anything, or I'm telling anybody to bet Tai, but it's kind of one of those spots where, you know, it's how does the person slaughter the lamb in many scenarios. And I guess that's like my slight point of contention with the under. Like, I don't hate it at all because I think you can make very viable arguments for it, especially with Tuivasa kind of being a, reckless, get you out early, probably not after that, shit's going to happen. My issue is it's determining when kind of the pivot is going to happen. I think the 3.5 was obviously a good look because I think most books have actually dropped now to a 2.5. So I think you
so most books were 2.5. I have minus fight doesn't start round 4 is minus 135. The under 3.5 was minus 155, I believe, on most books. But yeah.
Oh, you played the
doesn't start round 4.
Okay.
Minus 135. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Because I was originally looking to play that around like Pick'em, because that opened around Pick'em, the under 3.5 around Pick'em, and then it got smoked as soon as it opened up more books, which makes sense.
Yeah, and so I completely understand. I'm just like ever so slightly on the other side where I think it's a spot where Gane could just play with his food and respect the power of Tai, where Tai probably comes out heavy early. Or Tai tries to play more tactically because he actually has in certain fights recently too, which obviously would not be stupid or would not be smart. He probably has to go out there and try to bomb on Gane and get him out in 10 minutes. That's his pretty much win condition. There's just been certain spots in Gane's fights where he's kind of played with his food a little bit at times too. So I'm not, and I don't think he's like a perennial knockout artist at heavyweight. He has power, but like, I still think it's kind of more attritional with him of just being so technical and being able to break guys down more so than him having like this brooding pure KO, type of power too. Obviously, to your point, an angle with the under, if he comes out here and grapples, I mean, Tai looks like absolute dog shit on bottom at the same time too. So I think that would be smart. Can you bank on him to do that though? I don't know. And so that's my thing with Gane. It's like, I kind of think it's really just up to Ciryl Gane how he wants to win this fight, in a lot of ways, where based on what his mindset going into the fight is, depending on how Tai decides to come out and fight him, I'm not running to the window just in general to bet this fight. I'm honestly kind of more so on the side of like Gane 4-5 decision, which I think was like plus 140 at FanDuel at one point. So that's kind of where my lean is, but I think you make a substantial argument for the under as well. Another one of those fights, I think you can make solid arguments either way. So, but yeah, Gane by late stoppage is my official prediction. So
yeah, a couple things for me, I guess, real quick on that is, I guess first off the top, it's not a heavy play for me for that reason. Like I see small areas where he could just pick apart in his food and whatnot. But like, to me, I feel like Tai just comes forward more, like say for instance, like than a Lewis. Like Tai is going to come at him, throw those leg kicks, and for better or for worse, try and get him out of there.
Yeah.
Like where Lewis is just kind of like safe with stand back, trying to land that big bomb on the counter.
Yeah. I hear you. I think you have like I said, dude, I think you have a solid argument. For me, I'm just gonna probably sit there and stay away overall. But all right, guys, we just ran through it. 12 fights, UFC Paris, getting through it. I guess, do you want to just run through our quick picks here right at the end?
Yeah.
To recap?
So I guess for me, Egger, Taha, Saint Denis, Imavov, Figlak, Abus, Wood, Gomis, Makdessi, Chirico, Whitaker, and Gane.
Yeah, so that's pretty much the same thing for me, except I'm flopping with you on Jourdain and Wood. But yeah, it's kind of a weird card, man. I think there's viability to some dogs, but it's kind of weird, bro. Like in the last, I think 2 to 3 or so cards, I just feel like it's been so chalk heavy where we've kind of had to sit there and try to pick out like the one shining dog type of spot. Like we all hit the Tybura, shit.
That was great.
Landwear from the other week. But I think in general, like they're booking like these super chalk heavy type of cards. So gotta be a little careful with them overall. But all right, guys, that is going to do it. Episode number 106 of the Club and Sub podcast. Once again, support me and all the boys and our boy John. Send him some virtual prayers with his appendix going out with a subscribe. subscribe to the channel, guys. We're trying to get to 1,000 before the end of this year. That would be awesome. We've been putting on the podcast for a little over 2 years now. We appreciate you guys tuning in and listening every single week, giving out some good, solid plays. All of us are long-term profitable gamblers on this podcast, so we appreciate your support. As always, we will be back next week, same time, same channel. Any words for the people on the way out, Legs?
UFC 279 next week. It'll be a fun one. We get to see Chimaev Diaz.
The slaughter. I was honestly, I was thinking about going to it, and then I looked at what the prelim card looked like. I was like, no,
it's not. No, it's shit. No, it's shit.
I think the actual like top level pay per view is really, really good, but the prelims are just.
It is. And you know what's really funny? You know the guy on Twitter. I'll shout him out real quick. Alex Behuin, I think his name, something like that. He was asking Dana White about. He was like, "Oh, you added the Holland Rodriguez fight to 279 because it was so lackluster before that." And he was like, "Oh man, what a dick." He's like, "You're a dick." That was good. That was a good clip.
I saw that. All right, thanks for hanging out, guys. We will be back next week. Peace.